Welcome to Greatness. My name is Realtor Mehrooz. In the last decade, our company helped so many people just like you get the key to their dream home. Welcome to Modern Choice Financial Podcast, where we talk about real estate, finance, insurance, and much more. You don't want to miss out. Today we're shooting our show number 5, and the topic is home appraisal. It's a way overdue show. A lot of our audience and past clients and friends been asking about it, and I guess today is the day. We're going to talk about it and get all the mystery out of the game and figure out exactly how things are done. We have one of the OG of the appraisal in the house.
I wouldn't say OG, but over 20 years.
Over 20 years to me is OG.
It doesn't make me OG, man.
You guys been around, and we really appreciate all the service you've done for this wonderful city. As you know, town is growing and there's a lot coming up. Obviously, as different neighborhoods are changing, it's going to affect the appraisal because of the demographic and all the other stuff. So with that being said, Eric is in the house. He's been around forever. And we're going to conclude this show to 2 different sections, because appraisal is one thing that affects both the seller and the buyer of the property. How to price your property if you really want to sell it, and if you want to buy it, how to be realistic when you want to submit an offer. With that being said, Eric, floor is yours. Let's talk a little bit more about yourself and what have we got?
Well, I've lived in this town since 1999. No, I take that back, 1989. And I got appraisals right after 9/11. I was a dealer at Caesar's Palace before I did that.
That's crazy, because I used to deal in Caesar Entertainment, and then the last 4 years before I left the business, I was their pit boss or table game supervisor.
Okay, I was a dice dealer there, and I was doing that part time while I was interning doing this. So I think I put in 14 or 15 years in the casino. So,
wow.
And probably one of the rare people that ever quit dealing at Caesar's Palace. So.
Eventually it get tiring, because standing on your feet, long hours is, I don't know if you've seen the days when they start giving break every hour 20 instead of every hour. It became even more tiring.
I'll tell you why I got out of it. I got out of it, and I know we're not talking about dealing or we're talking about casinos, but I got out of it because it ended up feeling too much like a factory job at the end of the day. And back in the day, these guys used to keep every single cent they made. But now, when they go out and they hustle tips, obviously it goes into a big pool and then it gets split up, and it's totally a different business because of that. So,
Totally agree.
yeah.
So with that being said, you were saying that you got out of the casino business and...
Well, in 2002, I started my internship. I did a couple of years of my internship, and then I ended up getting my certification in early 2005, early 2006, and I've been on my own basically since then. So, and I've experienced the whole roller coaster that we've had, along the way, for sure.
That is awesome. So, I guess one of the main concern that most people have, whether they're a savvy investor or first-time home buyer that getting advice from uncle and friends and family, is if they're purchasing a property as an FHA versus a conventional, is there any major difference on their appraisal or guideline? Or because almost everybody is under impression that FHA appraisers are more tougher and more try to basically go lower than the real market value.
So you think that it's possible that the FHA appraisal can come in at a lower value? I'm not saying it's not true, because you have to understand that every year we get audited by HUD. We get audited. We get audited by HUD, and they pick out 2 or 3 or 4 appraisals. Just FHA. Conventionals don't get that audit, and then every year we've got to answer whatever questions they have. And if they don't like something, they're going to make you do beautification or they're going to do something. So I think that I don't think the value makes a difference personally from an FHA to a conventional. However, you've got to dot your I's and cross your T's when you're doing these FHAs, because those things can come back in the form of a HUD audit, if that makes any sense. And obviously the inspection is totally different on an FHA appraisal. If you want to talk about that, we can talk about that.
Yeah, obviously we have to have the strap, double strap, and all the other stuff.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see for sure, especially like an area that we're in right now, you see all these houses from the 60s and 70s, and if something is built from 1977 or before, if there is any paint that is peeling, it's gotta be, I tell people it's gotta be scraped, but nobody would scrape it. They would just power wash it and they would clean it up. And then that doesn't matter whether it's conventional or whether it's FHA, because they have kind of deemed lead-based paint as a complete health hazard. And they look at it as, if a kid puts lead-based paint in their mouth, if it's got lead-based in it, it's almost certain brain damage from everything I've read in a developing mind. So the problem is a lot of times I'll condition it, and I'll condition the paint, and they'll go ahead and they'll power wash it or scrape it, and then they'll repaint it, and then I'll go down there, and there's thousands of paint chips on the ground. And obviously that's a problem. And this has nothing to do with FHA or conventional. It has everything to do with safety, or health and safety. And it's not going to matter what the loan is. Any appraiser has got to condition that.
All right, here's another question. A lot of people are under impression that there are certain appraisers that are only doing FHAs, and there are certain appraisers that are doing only conventional or VA. Is there such a thing out there, or it's just a myth?
No, most appraisers that do any appraiser that does FHA is also going to do conventional. In order to be FHA, you have to be in good standing with HUD, which is part of the audit they do every year. And then you also have to have a certified residential license, which there's two residential licenses. So you've got certified residential, and then you've got just your regular license. And after the 2008 Dodd-Frank Act, essentially, I'm not saying that that's what did it, but after the crash, they pretty much eliminated anybody that just is licensed and in FHA. So if you're licensed, you can't do FHA, but you have to be certified, which if you're licensed, you can only do up to $1 million property.
Oh, okay. So what happened with those $1 million houses and luxury homes? They have a different set of licensing and different appraisers.
No, it isn't that. I'm certified residential. Certified residential can basically do anything. They can do anything. But if you're just licensed, you can't do FHA and you can't do over $1 million. Why they made that arbitrary number, I don't know. Because like if you take $1 million in California, it's not like it's a mansion or something. I mean, $1 million in California
makes sense.
Could be a standard tract house.
Definitely.
So
pretty much, I'm glad that you're going in depth on answering all those questions so people understand the reasoning behind it. But long story short, whoever is licensed to do the FHA or conventional, they're basically the same. That there's no such a thing that FHA appraisers are different versus conventional.
There are some guys that just will not do FHAs anymore, just because
it's more regulated.
It's more regulated. They don't have to worry about the audit. They don't have to worry about it about HUD coming back and complaining about something essentially. And some guys just have had enough with HUD and they say, you know what, I'm just going to do conventionals and that's it. But you're never going to find anybody that says I only do FHAs. I mean, obviously because it's an FHA appraisal, we always get a little bit more in general, and I'm not going to talk about fees because the reality is fees are so, they vary from from one property to another. But the scope of work on an FHA, the scope of work and the liability on an FHA inspection, or we don't call it an inspection, we just call it, what do we call it? Basically observe and report, essentially. the scope of work is definitely way greater on an FHA compared to a conventional.
Because it's more tedious.
Well, it isn't that. FHA likes to pretend that we're home inspectors. The problem is they want us to flush all the toilets. They want us to make sure all the plumbing works. They want us to sample electrical outlets. They even want us to say whether the appliances are working properly. Which, listen, I'm not a home inspector. I can't tell you whether a dishwasher is working properly. I can turn it on and hear it, and that's it. I can't tell you whether a microwave is working properly unless possibly I bring some popcorn with me on an appraisal, which I'm not doing.
Makes sense. So with that being said, let's say, I guess, let's answer this $1 million question. How would an appraiser actually come up with the appraisal value, or I wouldn't say appraisal opinion, because it's technically based on the data that you collect from the home that was sold in the neighborhood, correct?
Well, yeah, obviously it is an opinion. At the end of the day, a value that I put on something is an opinion, and someone else could have a different opinion. And that's why I always tell people, whatever we do, it's not necessarily black and white. If I'm appraising a standard tract house, just a regular, whatever, let's just say a house built in 2005, 1,800 square foot, 2-story house. Okay, and I've got 3 houses that have just sold on the same street, similar upgrade, similar condition, similar lot, and they all sell for whatever, 300, just throw a number out, 350,000. Then obviously your value is basically 350,000, and obviously that could, and that's assuming that everything is equal, if that makes sense.
In most cases, let's say we have example of these 3 houses, right? We got one that is just got fully renovated, like when we went through this whole last 3 years of all the cash buyer bought the properties, renovated it, or we call it like put a lipstick on it, and then they put it in the market. But technically, they spend time and money to renovate the property and then put it back in the market. They have a new countertop, new sink, new appliances, fresh paint. They spend some more money to freshen up the property versus the same exact model from the same year, from the same builder in that community. It was sold, let's say, 2 months ago, but because it wasn't fully upgraded, how much of a effect the upgrades, let's say, renovated kitchen or renovated bathroom. And
this is what we want to do as appraisers. We don't want to put a value to it. What we want to do is we want to find another sale or 2 that have similar renovations, and that's not that hard in this market because obviously there's been a lot of flipped houses out here, and it's not that hard in this market. And then what you can do is you can look at those sales and you can compare them to the sales that haven't been as updated, and that's how you can extract your number. As an appraiser, we don't want to just throw an arbitrary number. That's the last case. That's the last thing we want to do is just throw a number randomly on it. But if the difference between identical houses, the remodels are selling for 400,000 and the ones that aren't remodeled are selling for 350, then obviously if we're just looking at it as a simple equation, obviously that the difference that the market will pay for the remodel is 50,000.
Okay, here's another case.
Okay.
These are the very common cases, like the house, the same size, the same lot. One has pool, one it doesn't. Or one has a loft with 3 bedroom, the other one has 4 bedroom. Basically, they converted from the beginning or later, they converted that loft to a 4th bedroom. Okay. So what are these basically have to do with the actual
well, the problem
equation?
Is you're talking about two separate issues. If we're talking about 3 bedrooms and a loft compared to 4 bedrooms, well, if I asked you as a realtor, if I asked you what's worth more, 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms and a loft, what would your answer be?
Obviously 4 bedroom, because
no. It's not. That's not the right answer. And the reason it's not the right answer is because it depends on whoever's buying the house. If it's a couple that only has 1 kid, why do they care if there's 4 bedrooms? Maybe they would want the loft over the bedroom.
Yeah, but that's the myth out there. That's why we're trying to clear it out, especially for our audience, right?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, bedrooms, a lot of people even converting a garage to an extra room to just add to the square footage of the property to just get more value for it.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is this: there's not a lot of negative. There's not a lot of negative stigmatism once you pass 2 bedrooms. Once you pass 2 is the minimum you need in a house. But is there a huge difference in the market from a 2 to a 3 bedroom? Yes. Is there a huge difference from a 3, 4, or 5? Probably not in all reality. Now, obviously, if you have 8 kids, you want as many bedrooms as you could possibly have. But at the end of the day, we're appraising to a typical buyer, not a specific buyer, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense, yes. And pool, having a pool or not having a pool, or let's say,
well, a pool's a good one, because I remember this is back in 2010, and there were 2 pool companies left in the city in 2010. And one of them, I'm not going to mention the name of the pool company, but I decided I was going to put a pool in my house, and I probably was a little upside down in my house like everybody was at that point, but I really wanted a pool. And it cost me for a 10,000 gallon pool with a rock waterfall and the concrete work and everything. It cost me $22,000. That same pool right now is probably in the neighborhood. I don't even know if you can start a pool for less than $60,000. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was guessing. It was $60,000-$70,000.
And
I have a friend, matter of fact, last year she put a pool in her property, and it's not a very big pool. Cost her freaking 90 grand.
Listen, 90 grand. If I told you that I was putting 90 grand in a pool 10 years ago, it was going to be a nice pool.
Oh yeah.
90 grand is nothing. 90 grand is like a standard, pool spa combo at this point, honestly. I mean, the price of pools has gone up exponentially. I mean, it's probably 3 to 4 times what it was, for sure. I mean, just, like I said, in 2010, it cost me $22,000. And they were digging the next day. I didn't even get approval from my HOA. They were just so desperate for work at that time that they said,
we take the permit later.
Oh no, they were digging, man. They were digging because they just wanted to keep these guys working, because they were literally, there was only 2 pool companies left, after the crash, because everything was underwater at that point, for sure.
Makes sense. So, going back to the original question, how much that would make a difference? A house with the pool, it's the same exact model house, same lot, everything.
Okay, I'm going to say that it's going to depend. But what I would say, if we're looking at standard track, and what's standard track out here right now? 300,000 to 500,000 for the most part, standard track.
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yes.
At 300,000 to 500,000, I think a good rule of thumb is, for a pool spa combo, and obviously it depends on the intricacy of it. I mean, sometimes you can go to the most, plain tract house in the world and have a pool that you would expect on a multi-million-dollar custom home. But I would say, for the most part, if you just look at it somewhere in the 10% of the value of it, I would say that makes sense. I mean, in other words, if I got a $350,000 home, or whatever, 300 to 400,000 for a pool spa, for me, 35 to 40,000 sounds right. But once again, it's one of those things that you don't want to put a value on it. You want the market to put a value on it. And what I would do is, if I was doing an appraisal on it, I would try to use as many pool sales as I had, where I didn't have to put an arbitrary value on it. If that makes any sense.
Definitely. So now, me as an real estate broker get called from a homeowner. Hey, I have a home that is made out of gold and diamond, and I want you to come here and I want to list it with you. So I go there, and I want to be able to properly convince the homeowner as far as what is the realistic market value of the property. So, because this is basically almost like a real estate meme. Every seller thinks their home is different. Mine is just a different one.
I know what you're saying, and some people don't have realistic expectations. And I see what some people do. Some people go to like Zillow and they'll go to Redfin, and sometimes they're spot on. I mean, sometimes it's just amazing how spot on they are, but sometimes they're so wrong that it's almost laughable. And they'll say, "Man, my house is worth $800,000," when I can't, I can just look at the comps and I can say, I don't know how you're going to get more than 6, but you're talking about a house made of gold and diamonds, right? there's a point. If there's a point where you never want to over improve your house to the market. You know, obviously, if you're in the Ridges, you're never going to over improve your house. If you're in McDonald Highlands, if you're in the Ridges, you're not going to over improve your house by putting in whatever the highest end kitchen or the highest end bathroom or a higher end pool or really any kind of upgrades. But if you're just in a standard tract neighborhood and you decide that you're going to do a $100,000 remodel to your house, you know, the odds are you're going to get some of it back. But you know, at the end of the day, if you're going to do something like that, it's because you want to do it and you're going to get the value and use out of it. But you shouldn't expect that the market is going to give you. If you put $100,000 into remodeling your kitchens and bathrooms in a neighborhood that's just plain Jane, you can't expect that the market's going to return $100,000. Maybe it'll return 30 or 40 or 50. Once again, it all has to do with what's out there in terms of sales. In terms of, is there anything as nice as ours? And then if we're nicer than everything else in the market or in that little, in that little area, at what point has the homeowner over improved this property?
I'm glad we have this conversation because this literally happened about probably a little over a year ago. Okay. One of my best friends bought a home with me right in the beginning of COVID. I think it was like $330,000. Same home obviously went up in value because of the market, and it went all the way to roughly about $500,000, right?
Oh, okay.
So, but he did actually put about $95,000 to $100,000 into renovation. He literally transformed the home. It's a beautiful home, right?
Was it for him to live in, or was it for him to as an investment to flip?
That's the thing. Initially, it was for him to live in, right? So he did whatever he wanted to in every single part of the house. But then come the time that he's like, you know what, maybe now that the values are up, I want to sell it, but look, I have all this money in this home, so people got to pay for it because it ain't cheap, because everything I use is high quality and the best cabinet, the best granite, the best of whatever, right? And here I'm trying to basically put it as nice as I can for one of my best friends that, you have a beautiful home, don't get me wrong, but realistically, your home value is maybe, let's say if the average home in the neighborhood would sell around $520,000, yours probably $550 max with all the upgrade. Right, but don't expect that you want to sell it for $630. You know what I mean? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're 100% right. And you know what? There are people that will take it personally.
Well, that's almost that's what happened.
They will take it personally because they said there is no way, because that house down the street that sold is a pile of whatever, and you just have to explain that, hey, listen, here's what the houses are that are remodeled are selling for, and then of course the argument's going to be is, well, they're not as nice as mine.
Exactly.
But you made your house more nice than the market will support. And that's why I said you can't do that in just in a regular tract home market. If you're in a nice area, Summerlin, sure, you can do that because you're going to have people that do high-end remodels. You're not going to get that in let's just say areas that aren't so upscale.
Yes. So going back to that seller. Because this literally happened about 10 days ago. I was at a listing appointment, and this very nice lady, her home is, my God, like I thought my mom is like germophobic and squeaky clean. This lady, everywhere is like shiny and like
you don't know the sick friend I have.
And her home is really nice. Outside, inside, it's a beautiful home. But when I run the comp, max her home could have been sold was $750, maybe $760. If someone really totally fall in love with the property, maybe $780. And she said, I want to sell it, but I'm not going anything lower than $920. I'm like, oh my God, that's like almost like $140,000 difference. Like, right. Where are we? Like, we can't even meet each other halfway.
Right.
So
and as a realtor, you don't want to be wasting your time either. I mean, it costs you money to market it, and it costs you time.
Definitely. That's what I'm trying to explain. And I'm glad we have the actual appraiser in here that can literally put validity on what I'm trying to explain to my client, whether they're seller or buyer. When it comes to selling side, obviously they have to be realistic on listing price. And when it comes to buying, we have buyers that whether they're a cash buyer or they put so much money down, or they just think, you know what, this house been sitting in the market for 40 days, so they should go lower in their price or whatever. But the reality is, if the market value of that property is, let's say, what they listed for, or maximum $10,000 less, don't expect us to put a $50,000 less offer and having a hope that it get accepted.
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that, but maybe they're hoping that whoever sees that house loves it, and they don't care that it doesn't appraise out, and they're willing to come in the additional cash. I mean, surely that happened during the pandemic. I mean, it was pretty much every single contract that I was going through was buyer willing to pay $40,000 more than appraisal, $50,000 more than appraisal, $10,000 more than appraisal.
It was all the free money, It wasn't really their hard-earned money, and especially in our market, I don't care about like New York or somewhere else. In Las Vegas market, we know about 70 to 65 to 70% of our buyers are coming from California, northern or southern, and they're the people that they bought property, let's say 10 years ago or 8 years ago for, let's say, 400,000. Now, same property is million. So it's on top of the extra appreciation that they got out of the selling of that property. They got all the PPP and all the other government free money. So money was just coming from everywhere, and people like, I don't care if I pay extra $50,000. I'm going to get that back in my tax that I'm not going to pay in Nevada for the next 5 years.
Well, the reality is if you bought a house during, especially after, anywhere from like maybe July of 2020 until probably until the interest rates started going up, probably about April of 2022, you were paying more than appraised value. Because it was really common. I mean, it was just about almost certain that, and I'm not saying everything was a value issue, what we call, hey, it's a value issue, but pretty much everything, wasn't appraising out. But they knew that they needed that extra money, that extra cash to come in, because, what were they doing? They were doing coming soons. And isn't that what realtors were doing during that time?
Yeah.
They were doing coming soons.
I put a property in the market Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. I went live. Mm-hmm. By end of the day, I had 21 offers. Right. Probably 6-7 of them didn't even see the house. Just based on the pictures and the other properties that have been sold in the market, they all minimum $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over asking.
Yeah, I totally.
Waiving the appraisal. It was just crazy.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And, listen, that is a actual direct result of the Fed. I shouldn't say this, but the Fed...
Just say it like you mean it.
Well, I will, because the Fed lowers rates because, after the pandemic, because they're worried that the housing market is going to suffer. And once they saw that the housing market did not get adversely affected. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Because what were people doing? They were working out of their houses, and they were buying bigger houses all the time.
Exactly, that's the thing.
Once they saw that, those rates should have started going up, and they didn't. And they let them sit there for what did we get to? Maybe 3.1 on a 30 at some point. I mean, we got to like 3%.
Pretty much. Yeah. Here's the problem we're facing right now. A lot of especially buyers, they're thinking that, okay, well, interest rates are up, house prices are still due to come even further down. But they don't calculate the fact that we're in a high inflation. Everything that was costing whatever, let's say a builder get a sheet of wood for $200 2 years ago or 3 years ago, same thing is costing if not double, at least time half, right? So how do you expect the builder to build something and sell it at basically no profit or loss? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, you're not gonna. I mean, the builder's not gonna build at a loss. Matter of fact, a lot of stuff that was going on in the pandemic, they were, before it really went up exponentially. They had contracts, and these builders were selling houses, for 500. They had contracts for 500,000 that were worth, $750 or something at the time they came to fruition. So, I'm sure the builders were kind of kicking themselves butt of it because obviously, even though I don't know contracts. I mean, I review contracts, but I don't know contracts. And if you ever looked at a builder's contract, it's like about 500 pages usually.
Oh yeah.
So
they got every corner of it tied up. Yeah.
But so I don't know if they had certain things in there, but what was I going to say? I think part of it is inflation, but I think a bigger part of it, like right now, has nothing to do with it. It doesn't have to do with inflation. It has to do with the fact that the only reason that we didn't have a 2008 style crash, as far as I'm concerned, is one, people came in so much cash in their houses where they didn't, in 2005, 6, and 7. And the other reason is because people who are sitting on a 3% rate right now, literally, even if they just wanted to say, hey, we want to move to a new area, or we just want the same price house, they literally can't afford it. Because I don't have an interest calculator on me. But I'll guarantee you, if you've got a $250,000 mortgage at 3.25%, and you figure out that same that $350,000 mortgage on 8%, I don't know what the difference is, but it's probably double if I was guessing.
Pretty much. The issue that we have is a lot of people right now, because economy is not doing as well as it used to be in the last 3 to 4 years. A lot of people, even though the interest rates are high, I start hearing from banks or from credit unions or some mortgage companies that they do cash out refi. They actually start getting refinanced because they just need money. And they're the only way to get anything, because most banks are not doing personal loans anymore. A lot of banks don't even give credit card anymore. So the only way to get something secure, but to hold them over this madness that we're experiencing right now, is pretty much putting something as in collateral, which is their house, and they're just refinancing.
Yeah, but are they doing a full-on refi, or are they doing just a HELOC so they don't mess with the rate on the other part of it? I mean, I'm not saying I'm not a loan officer. I know very little about loans, but I know that if I had a 3% rate and current rates were 7.5 or 8, I wouldn't want to touch with that. If I needed the money, to pull out, you would assume that a HELOC, if they had, assuming obviously they have enough equity in it, which most people do, especially if they bought, if they're sitting on a 3% rate, the odds are they probably do. But who knows? But at the end of the day, I think a HELOC is probably the way to go. As an appraiser right now, it's very rare that I see a refi. I mean, I'll see them every now and then in the form of an FHA reverse mortgage, but I don't see almost never, maybe one a month, I'll see a conventional refi. Because why would you trade in your 3.5 for an 8? And
that's why there's shortage of inventory. And that's another reason why the price of the houses are not coming down, because there's not that much inventory. Nobody's selling. You know what I mean?
That's correct.
And whatever is in the market, that's it. I mean, I just had, because at our office, as you know, we do mortgage, real estate, insurance. We're kind of like set up as a multi-service office, right? So I'm getting news from different mortgage companies on a daily basis. Like, we just had a big blast on a couple of major mortgage companies, nationwide companies, that rates are dropping. Today's rate is a quarter point less than last week. So there is a sign, and I'm wrong, but I think by the time, like a couple of months prior to election next year, we will have that drop.
I think you're 100% right. I think they are going to manipulate rates to make the economy look like it's better than it is. And there's a danger in that. And the danger is let's just say rates tomorrow go to whatever, say in 6 months they go to 5.5. What is that going to do to prices?
Goes up.
Yeah, because people have now acclimated to these prices. Even at 7, 6, 7, 8%, they've acclimated to them, and they realize that the cost of housing is going to be this much.
here another thing that is actually supporting everything is higher rent due to inflation and everything. Obviously, the landlord pays higher for their tax and also their insurance on their property, and everything else went up. So they're like, if I want to do any repair, it's costing more. So due to all of that, I need to collect more rent. So rents went up, and people are thinking, like, literally today I had a buyer consultation. We're planning to put an offer on a property that it's roughly about $380,000. We calculated the mortgage on an average, it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,600. And I'm like, okay, it's a 4-bedroom house, really nice, ready to move in, and basically the rent on that property is going to be much more than this. If not $2,800 or $3,000, at the minimum, it would be $2,600. So rent is one thing. When you pay, you never get that money back. But when you're paying mortgage, at least you're building equity on your home and also future appreciation, correct?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the affordability of rent is a whole different story. I mean, that's it's insane. I mean, I can't imagine, just being on the sidelines and most people have jobs that, hey, I make $80,000 a year or $70,000 a year. Most people just, most people in general don't have the ability to say, well, I made 50 last year, but I'm going to make 100 next year. And if you just think back, pre-pandemic to where it is right now, rents have got to be double. They've got to be double what they were, I would say.
Of course, almost, yeah. Pretty much.
I mean, you're not getting you could find houses all day long. Maybe they weren't the nicest houses, but you could find houses all day long, at $1,000 pre-pandemic. Right now, you're lucky to find a house under a couple thousand, a decent house in a half decent neighborhood.
Definitely, for sure. I mean, I had a client about a month and a half ago. He rents 3-bedroom condo, $1,900.
Yeah.
3-bedroom condo.
Yeah,
no garage, no yard. It's just a condo.
I mean, listen. As an appraiser, I mean, I just don't do values of houses. When somebody buys something as an investment and the bank wants to know what the actual market rent will be, obviously I've got to figure that out as well. And I mean, it's shocking to see what rents go for. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And I say to myself, I guess thank God I'm not a renter right now. But I can only imagine, being a renter and say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to sit on the sidelines and I'm not going to do anything. And 5 years later, you're paying 2 or 2.5 times your rent. And I guarantee you, in general, your income hasn't gone up 2 or 2.5 times. I mean, unless you're fortunate enough for, something like that to happen. Obviously, that doesn't happen to people that often.
Definitely. With that being said, I don't want to take too much of your time. I know your time is very valuable, and we don't want to bore our audience. I'm sure to be continued. Hopefully, we're going to invite you again for answering all the other questions that I'm sure it's been dropping on our social medias for all these different live platforms. But here's the thing: if you want to give one tip per side, let's say you want to give a tip to a seller and you want to give a tip to a buyer, what would be?
Boy, that's a tough one because I don't deal with buyers and sellers. I just deal with properties. But I would say, if I'm going to give a tip.
Let's say your brother is trying to sell his home.
I don't like my brother, though. No, I'm just kidding. Listen. If I was going to give a tip to a seller, I would say just and people contract me all the time where they'll just contract me to see what a house should sell for, and I can do that. And I always tell them when I give them a value, I give them a full report with a value. I said, I know that I put in $350 on the appraisal. Don't list it for $350. List it for $370 or $380 because even though I think my data is solid, you may just find the right buyer that says, yeah, we know it's not going to appraise, but you know what, we're okay with it. So I would just say from a buyer standpoint, a seller standpoint, you want to obviously shoot as high as you can shoot, but you also want to have realistic expectations.
That's the most important thing. So as we talk, we have one of my properties is listed. I mean, not my property, my seller's client. And when we were doing the seller consultation, I came to conclusion that the house is not gonna make it to anywhere more than, let's say, 410, 415. It's actually a beautiful townhouse right around Southern Highland, right behind this South Point Casino. Okay, they're building like there's no tomorrow there.
Right.
The home is just past 1 year, pristine, like literally brand new.
It's a year old, so,
right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's just not go anywhere more than 420. But she had a valid point. Look, builder is building still, and in that same community, right? And the houses with no upgrade, just a bare bone property with no upgrades, are going for 420 or 430. And then if they want to change the floor and upgrade the cabinet, countertop, put all the shades and all the other stuff, obviously they all cost money. And I spend all that money for my house, going back to same thing, like you don't overspend on, if you're planning to sell, obviously, right? Most people at the time when they're renovating their property or changing the stuff, probably they don't think like, okay, if I want to sell, am I getting the money back or not? So that was the case. You spend about 35, 40 grand on renovation. It's like, well, I can't sell it less than 450. I'm like, okay, well, you tell me you list it for 1 million, I list it. But if you want to sell it, this is not the price. Let's just be realistic.
Right. Well, I mean, is it still on the market right now?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is even though she may have all those upgrades, the problem is if they can walk into the builder's office and people can say, hey, I don't like that. When you're buying a house that's existing, you can't change out the cabinets. You can't change out the flooring. I mean, you can do it theoretically, but why would they do that when they can go into the builder and basically for the same money, maybe it costs a little bit more, but they would get what they wanted and not what she wanted.
Exactly. Same thing goes back for the buyers as well. As I said, I'm giving you all this experience that I've been through. Like I have this other gentleman from other state. He just moved in here, live with family, and he has some cash. He wants to buy a decent property, but he wants to basically go like $30,000-$40,000 less than the actual listed price. And every property that we show him is like, oh, how many days it's been in the market? I'm like, it's irrelevant. If this was 3 years ago, this was fully relevant.
Right.
But in this market, most properties are sitting minimum 45 days to 60 days in the market. That's just average right now because there's not that many qualified buyers in the market. If this was 3 years ago, after 3 days, people think, what's wrong with this house? Why it's not sold?
Well, no,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what do you literally have to make to qualify for a $500,000 mortgage right now? I mean, I don't even know because I don't do mortgages, but I imagine you have to be a pretty hefty earner. At 500,000. I'm just saying a $500,000 mortgage. It's not like 600,000 or 700,000. It's something elaborate in the city.
Well, obviously it depends on how much money you put down, but yeah, consider household income about 7,000 and above.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you talked to me about realistic expectations of a seller. I mean, if I was given, or not realistic, but if I was given advice to a seller, not a seller, a buyer, boy, I don't have any advice for a buyer, man. I would just say, don't overspend. I mean, because at the end of the day, man, I don't even know what to say to a buyer right now. I mean, that's a rough one. I mean, seller's easy, but a buyer.
Like let's say this particular buyer that I was mentioning, like they're being, to me, way like unrealistic. Oh, I have cash, and my response was, okay, so what? Cash, let's say 5,000, 10,000, maybe 15,000 less than what the property is listed.
Yeah.
Okay. But don't expect the guy to go $40,000 less just because you have cash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is not like 2008.
I'm telling you, man, cash, it was amazing because what I noticed more than anything else, the cash sales, and you can go through MLS and look at cash sales, and the ones that, you would think that cash is going to get you the discounts. But But in a lot of cases, a lot of cash sales are the ones that set the high watermark. You know, they are, because obviously if they're paying cash, they don't necessarily have to go through the loan process that a lot of other people have to go through, which means that they may not have to go through an appraisal process to actually,
that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just the opinion of them, and if the seller like to sell it at this point and they come to agreement, there's no appraisal. So it's just totally internal agreement.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, I'm sure cash is more valuable right now than it was, say, a year and a half ago. But I don't think cash is that valuable in the market. It's not like, hey, I have cash, will you sell it to me 10% cheaper? Why would they do that, say, like in the, during the pandemic, when, like I said, you said, people were just doing coming soons, and you had, by the time it went to market, you already had 21 offers. Why would they?
Exactly.
Who cared? Who cares at that point? The guy's going to take the biggest offer. The seller's going to take the biggest offer he can take that makes sense. Obviously, you don't want to take someone that is dependent on doesn't have a nickel on them past what they have, and can't obviously during that time for sure. You want to make sure that people have cash so they can either waive the appraisal contingency, or they can say, hey, you're going to pay $50,000 more than appraised value.
Honestly, I think the only properties are really deemed to be most likely sold cash and under what the seller wants is the properties that need TLC, and they're basically they're not market ready per se.
Yeah.
And that's the only way the buyer can bargain and say, hey, look, even if I buy it, I need to spend money to renovate it, to change the floor, to put a new paint,
right,
change the sink, faucet, all these cost money, da. But if the property is, let's say, decent, it doesn't need to be fully upgraded, but it's decent. Everything is nice, even though it might be a little bit aged. They don't need to be replaced because they just look good.
Right.
Why would somebody just go down? And I wouldn't. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, back to what you were saying about what were you saying? Now I can't remember. I had something on my mind.
We were saying about the buyer trying to be realistic about how to put an offer on a property, even if they have cash. It's all right. The show being a little bit longer than usual because we want to clip it a little bit more. And you guys drop your questions on social medias. And also, we're going to have, again, this series continues, basically. Eric, hopefully, in the next month or so, we're going to have him back to answer the rest of your questions. With that being said, I think we're going to conclude today's show, right?
Sounds good.
And then we're going to answer the rest of them in an upcoming episode. Stay tuned. It's going to come up maybe 2 episodes down the road. But definitely we're going to have some more back. I'm going to get all your questions that you already drop in and basically conclude them in the future episode. If we miss some of them, I hope we didn't. But if we did miss your questions, we're definitely going to answer them in an upcoming episode. And with that being said, I think that will conclude today's show, right? And make sure you follow our social medias. Go to, everything is under Realtor Mehrooz, okay? It's been branded as a Realtor Mehrooz from day one, even though I worked so hard to get the broker license and all of those, but everybody knows the brand as in Realtor Mehrooz. So whether you're in Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, even our YouTube channel is under Realtor Mehrooz, but we have a specific playlist which is under Modern Choice Financial Podcast. Dropping your questions so we can answer them in the future shows. Talk to you guys soon. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And appreciate that. And see you guys later.